Year One by Franz Wright. Uh, this poem, I think, gets really close to the idea of what I consider to be a definition of poetry. I tend to define poetry somewhere along the lines of the attempt to find truth using language in as efficient a manner as possible. And if that's how you're going to go ahead and define poetry, I think that all the truth that you can have here in this poem sort of opens up and shows just how complex this art can be. So, this poem, Year One, very brief poem, only 6 lines long, but there's a lot going on. For example, the first stanza, that's the first 2 lines, says, "I was still standing on a northern corner." So, first question to ask is, what does the word still mean? You know, are we talking about still as in not moving or still as in remaining? So you see here how Franz Wright has already put in something where there's ambiguity. Okay, this isn't vagueness, it's ambiguity, it's multiple possibilities. So I was holding still standing on a northern corner versus I was still standing on a northern corner as if I've been there for a long time. And this multiplicity of possibility is purposeful. And then, of course, you have to consider, why is the corner northern? I'll let you try to think through that one on your own. As for the next stanza, that long line there in the middle, "Moonlit winter clouds, the color of the desperation of wolves." So, let's unpack this a little bit, because this is a complicated piece. So, wolves. We can all picture that, right? Now consider the desperation of wolves. What would that be? The desperation of wolves. Think about that. Wolves, like, out there, it's cold, their numbers are dwindling, you know, maybe they're having trouble finding food. All of these things. All the things that would be embodied in the desperation of wolves. Try to get your mind around that a little bit. Now, what color is that desperation? Okay, it would be easy to say gray, but you don't have to go with gray. You can think of something else. So the color of the desperation of wolves. Okay, so we've got that. So we got the whole tail end of this line worked out, which is pretty complicated. But then that brings us to the first half. "Moonlit winter clouds, the color of the desperation of wolves." Here's the big catch. Is the word clouds a noun or a verb? Think about that for a second. Okay, so if the word is a noun, and this is the conclusion that most people jump to initially, this line is a sentence fragment and it's also just a description. So "moonlit winter clouds, the color of the desperation of wolves." So you're just saying that the clouds are the color of the desperation of wolves. So the clouds are those things that float around in the sky, and they happen to be the color of the desperation of wolves. Okay, so you got that. That's easy. That's what most people grab onto. But then there's the interesting way of looking at it as if clouds is a verb. Okay? If clouds is a verb, then this is actually a complete sentence. It's an active sentence, because if it's a noun, then we don't actually have a verb in this sentence at all. So, if it is a verb, "moonlit winter" is in the act of clouding the color of the desperation of wolves. Got that? So, you have 2 very different ways of looking at this. It's either an image of moonlit winter clouds, the color of the desperation of wolves, or moonlit winter is in the act of clouding the color of the desperation of wolves. So, again, just like the word "still" in the first stanza, right here, we have multiple possibilities, and Franz Wright is not going to just go ahead and tell us which one is right. And that is not an accident, and it's not a shortcoming. It's purposeful. It's to demonstrate that in language there are multiple possibilities, and that the ambiguity is ultimately more inclusive than just grabbing onto one possible interpretation. Okay? And that brings us to the third stanza. "Proof of your existence, there is nothing but." Okay? This one, I think, better than most any other poem, really demonstrates the purpose and value of a line break. Because, obviously, the "your," potentially he's talking about a God figure here. So proof of your existence, proof of God's existence, there is nothing. That's very hopeless, right? Like, that's very dark and horrifying, right? But it says there is nothing but. In other words, trying to say that everything is proof of God's existence. So, how does this demonstrate what a good line break is? This is how. If it doesn't break the line after nothing, and it just says proof of your existence, there is nothing but, as if this were prose, then there wouldn't be any mystery there. It would just be saying proof of your existence, there's nothing but. So everything is proof, and that's it. But by breaking that line, we get that moment of hesitation there, where we have to consider that quite literally there is no proof. Okay, that quite literally there is no proof of a higher power's existence. There is nothing. And we have to deal with the despair of that thought for a moment and consider it and all of its possibility. And then we get the word but, resolving it, showing us that maybe there is hope after all. Okay? So, this poem, composed of these 3 stanzas, these 3 little chunks, each of them has multiple possibilities. Each of them is, like I gave that definition of poetry, an attempt to find truth using language in as efficient a manner as possible. And because of their ambiguity and because of how they can be taken in different ways, that actually opens it up. Because truth is sloppy. Truth is messy. It's not necessarily a clear-cut thing where you can just say that a thing is, as it is, and that's end of discussion. It's something that a lot of times has a lot more flexibility to it, has a lot more messiness to it. And I think Franz Wright, yet another Pulitzer winner, does a good job here breaking that down for us.